Start off with, tell us about you.
My name's Andy. I've been a software developer since 9 years old, something like that. Starting off in Visual Basic and Quick Basic. Migrated to C++ and VB.NET, and then into Java world, and then because of this very group, ended up becoming a contractor and jumped from Java into Golang, and then started to pick up a few DevOps bits on the side as well. So Golang DevOps is where I kind of sit now. But yeah,
Nice. Because of this very group, I like that.
Yeah. Plug the benefits of social groups.
Okay, so Flomation.
Yes.
What is it?
So Flomation is a workflow automation tool. Hence the name, Flomation. So contracts that I've worked on the last few years have all centered around public sector. So they're HMRC, DWP, things like that, where there's a noticeable theme of stuff being automated or needing to run on a schedule or triggered by some sort of thing happening, primarily with subpar tools with very high license costs, like six-figure license costs. And when you kind of spend months and then you move to a different department and you see them doing all the same thing again with a slightly different tool, a slightly different invoice, and then you move to a whole different department and you see the same kind of things happening, and I'm sat there and I'm like, I can do better. Surely I can do better. So myself and a colleague that I met at the HMRC started plotting and scheming of how would we do this better, what bits would we take from existing tooling, what would we build from the ground up, what would be brand new, because a lot of the existing tooling was kind of legacy stuff that had been around for years and years and years, not necessarily great cloud, where you can scale up and down your workloads and stuff like that. It was designed to sit on a box of tin in a data center somewhere and just to plod away and run a script at some time every night, do a batch job or something like that. So we came up with the idea of Flomation, which we wanted to provide initially as just a cloud SaaS tool, but then we started digging into it and well, this doesn't work in all environments, and different customers and things like that want it on-prem and they want it all kind of air-gapped and stuff like that, so we need to design it so that we can do a bit of cloud, a bit of on-prem, a bit of both as a hybrid thing in between as well, so kind of maximum flexibility. And what we didn't want to do, because again, we saw this at the places we'd worked at previously, is we didn't want to have to require an IT resource or a technical resource to have to do it.
Yep.
So the people typically doing the work, whether that be finance reports or data migration, things like that, kind of know that job. They know that job, but they're not necessarily technical people. So if they were going to try and automate something, they'd have to file a ticket with IT, wait 6 months for a resource to be applied, find a budget for it, hire someone in, and that sort of type thing. So we thought, well, why don't we target or build a tool that is kind of low code, no code. The people then that actually know the work can kind of just drag stuff in, join it up. It's like building Lego, basically, and can kind of automate really mundane, boring parts of their job, so they can do the more fun stuff, or not be quite so miserable coming in on a Friday going, I've got mileage reports to do. So that was where the idea came about, a kind of a node-based drag and drop Lego building UI, put stuff together, rather than having to sit there writing bash scripts or Perl scripts or Python or something like that. That obviously is beyond a lot of users if they're not from a technical audience.
Nice. The sort of things you're automating then are kicking off a report generation, moving data from this into a data warehouse or into a reporting structure, so then I can run my report from it.
Yes.
That sort of thing.
So, I mean, those are great examples. Obviously, everyone goes mad for dashboards and reports and things set to C-suite or your senior leadership and stuff like that. And often those reports take ages to put together, have loads of different data sources and things like that. There's obviously tools that does reporting, but this is just an example of where you could use Flomation for that. You could put together a dynamic form as well that you send out to your sales team to get them to put in where they've been that week and what contacts and customers they'd seen, automatically filter into a pipeline then that follows up with that customer the next week, starts to put a case file together or a CRM, that kind of type thing, as well as your fairly standard batch jobs that run at midnight, every night to migrate data from S3 buckets, map reduce it, stick it somewhere else, that kind of things.
Is it fair to say it's something a little bit like, and if this then that, but not just connecting systems, it's going a little bit deeper than that because you're actually going in and running scripts and databases.
Yeah, so it's not just...
It's not just saying, because this happened, trigger that over there.
Yeah, it's because this happened, let's go and do stuff with that thing that's happened and bring in stuff from elsewhere, but in a way that doesn't require you to be that highly technical resource.
Yes. Okay. So what are those Lego bricks then? Give us some examples of what they might be.
So those are kind of fairly generic plugins, and there's some really kind of core basic ones that mean that if we haven't given you an off-the-shelf component, you can do everything yourself. So they are webhooks and doing an HTTP request, if blocks, loops, SQL query. So you can go onto your Postgres database, run an SQL query, get a bunch of rows back, convert those rows into a JSON object, vice versa, JSON back into a table data of some sort. Pull out bits of data, run regex against the data, so you can match what you need to do. Those are kind of core basic ones, and then there are things like go off to your Active Directory and query all the users. Go and update the users that haven't logged in for 30 days and disable their accounts. If this user has now moved from one department to another, what group membership do they need changing? So obviously there's a really big focus, enterprise as well as public sector, of kind of data security and access security, and people move departments all the time, or people leave an organisation, and then there's lots of examples, and we all sit there going, oh, well, we'll just disable their account on the day they leave. But there's been lots of examples of that not happening, and usernames and passwords are still active 6 months a year.
I haven't done that for a month, I haven't done that for 3 months. I should do that really.
Lots of examples of some developer that left a government department is AWS account still being active 2 years after they've left, and potentially could cause a problem.
Yeah.
So by kind of automating that, again, in a nice handy thing, you can hook into all the different systems an organisation might have. There's one thing just disabling an Active Directory account, but do all the cloud tools that modern organisations work have that as SSO and things like that, or therefore their own systems that they've got to then go in and disable and things like that. So by making it easy to edit that as well, you're not having to go and edit a script to say, oh, well, we forgot we added in Timetastic for holidays, so we need to try and work out that API. Actually, you can drop in a block that just posts the endpoint in a nice, handy, documented way of doing it.
And so will you have a block there for Timetastic, or will you have like a webhook block?
So we'll start off with like an HTTP request block that's already in, and then obviously the goal is to grow to basically, if you can think of it, we should have a plugin available.
Yeah.
Obviously that
building
takes
kind of like
time.
a marketplace of all the various things. Yeah. Yeah.
And people can contribute plugins as well.
Nice.
So if you're not waiting on me to build it.
Because immediately my head's going to SQL Server integration services, because that's where I've done this sort of thing before, and horrendous flow diagrams that you can't debug and are annoying. And I imagine this is the sort of thing you'd be trying to replace with something a bit more intuitive.
Yeah, so we are painfully aware that debugging flows and processes like that is not trivial and not necessarily really intuitive. So we use a visual editor for your nodes for actually building your flows. And you drop in your node and you join it together. But then when you execute that node, you have that same view, and your boxes all turn green, or they turn red where it's gone wrong, and you go into it and you can see the exact data that box had come into it, any logs that come out of it, and the output that came from it. So you can see that it's got 2/3 of the way through your flow and then it's just ended. But you can actually then go and kind of click into the node that's got a red line around it, tells you that it's errored, and see what was the error drawn, why did it get all the way there and not fail before, or why did it not fail later, so that you can then easily debug.
Yeah, nice.
Because I'm sure no one in this room enjoys crawling through logs.
Well, I don't think anyone does. But this is for non-technical users. So how do you, because that for me sounds like non-technical users can do so much, but then it starts to rapidly get complicated and it starts to get a bit more difficult.
You can kind of unlock the complication. So if you're a normal user that would just go in and run a flow, who doesn't necessarily own the flow, doesn't edit the flow, will then never go in and try and debug that flow. The person that's built it can use those tools and obviously see where it's behaving and go into where it was executed by Dave last night. He's edited the work, or something happened. why not? But you can then also continue to kind of dig deeper and like, well, here's actually just all the logs as they would be in a normal CloudWatch or Splunk or something like that system. And then you can also have code nodes. So if you do want to kind of be a power user and you're a technical person or developer, there is nothing stopping you dropping in some JavaScript or some Python to actually just execute that then if you want to do something that we don't provide out of the box.
Nice. So it's yeah. So I can see kind of a relationship between IT and the users then really. So rather than IT getting bogged down with service desk requests coming in, tweak this, tweak this, tweak this, they help build a system that allows more of those service desk tickets to be self-serve.
So self-serve is a massive thing throughout my career. I've always wanted people, I refer to it as push button get bacon.
Okay.
So users can push button and get whatever it is they want to do as much
Does
as possible.
Can I get bacon?
No. I'll do a no. that just is available for you. When you press it, I'll fire up the air fryer and then I'll come over and hand deliver some bacon to you.
Yeah.
But the idea, you know, none of us wants to be doing password reset requests or anything like that. If a user can reset their own password, their line manager can onboard a new employee without having IT to have to do much, then that helps everyone.
Yeah.
We all know that IT departments are underfunded, overwhelmed, and very grumpy at times. And if you go to them and they're like, "File a ticket. Have you done a ticket? Have you tried turning it off and on again?" There's a bit of a stereotype. Then if we can reduce that as much as possible, then great. However, I imagine you get in there at some point as well. There's a huge amount of control that needs to be around security, compliance, and auditing. So what we don't want is Bob in the accounts department having full read-write access to your SQL server and using it in the password. So IT can control all of the credential side of things, and the users that are building the flows basically just from a drop-down go, oh, that's the data server, click. They never see the credentials, they never have access to the credentials. The flow, when it executes, grabs those in kind of real time and decrypts them and uses them at that point. They're never printed in logs, they're never transferred anywhere else. So IT can be aware, have control over who has access to these credentials, from like an RBAC point of view, and also have a good level of confidence that they're not being printed out to someone's email by accident, going, send an email to Fran, here's the database password, and place in a placeholder and things like that. So there's controls around that, so your IT director or whatever doesn't suddenly go, we can't be doing that, we can't have passwords and access to things like that.
And presumably, depending on how much you trust your user and their technical competence, you can control kind of how much SQL because they could bring your database down with a badly formatted query, or they could pull data out that maybe they shouldn't be able to access.
So that will come down to normal database access mechanisms.
Okay, yeah.
So you
so
create
using
a
that
user
user
that can
has
only
access
do
to these.
read access to these schemas, for example.
Yeah.
The flow wouldn't have a layer on top of that beyond the normal RBAC controls of this user can access these credentials. But in terms of your actual gatekeeping of data within your database, you'd use whatever your normal native control mechanism is there.
Nice. It's like you thought it through.
No, on the drive-in.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move into software architecture and how it's actually built.
I've vibe coded the whole thing.
Perfect. We'll come on to AI and roast you. Microservices, monolith, bit of both.
Not a monolith, individual services.
Yeah.
But I personally have moved away from kind of super microservices.
Just don't want to use the term, do you? Because you get flamed for it.
I'll get the definition wrong.
I know what's got the road.
You don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I went like really extreme and ended up having like a platform in a previous thing that had like 40 different services all doing like one thing, which is kind of what you're supposed to do. But then it becomes an absolute nightmare for management. You've got 40 different EC2 instances running on AWS and 42 different scaling groups and things like that. And it's like, actually, these two spend loads of time talking to each other. Let's kind of combine them a bit. So I'm kind of a bit more of a pragmatic approach to, yes, it's not all just one great big thing, but it's not just individual function per service.
Yep. Okay.
So there are a number of services built in Golang. That's the language of choice that I'm using at the moment, and have kind of the most experience with over the last 10 years now. Super fast for getting things up and running. Great for web-based services as well as command line tooling. Has loads of great stuff in its kind of standard library. You're not having to constantly put in third-party packages, and the fun that you sometimes get with that.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean? Not having to put third, because it
No,
has.
there's plenty of third-party stuff, but the standard library in Golang has kind of enough to cover 80% of what you kind of want to do, without, say, like the Java world or the Node world, where actually kind of what you can do standard is very, very small, and you kind of default to let's bring in another NPM package, and then we get things like leftpad and the current, the recent attacks, like supply chain attacks that you've had in NPM land and things like that. Whilst obviously I'm not saying Golang's immune to any of that, because you have so much kind of out of the box without having to put in third parties, your risk to that is lower.
Yeah. I'm also remembering zero dependencies
was the name of my company.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
so
I got
this is very much in line.
Too many times I got woken up in the night by a build failing and it causing a problem, or getting into work the next day because an upstream dependency had changed something.
Yes.
And everyone's like, oh well, you should pin your versions and like that. Yes, but we all know the real world happens, and not everyone does that. And stuff's eating, and then you're relying on them pinning their dependencies and their dependencies and things like that. So it's just a way of trying to mitigate some of that.
So what do you do to protect on that kind of supply chain? Because presumably you do pull in some third party.
Yeah, there's always going to be some third party things.
What do you do for vulnerabilities or license checks? Because
so one of the great things that is good about Golang as well is the kind of the tool chain that you come out of the box has a static analysis tool built in. There's a linting tool built in. There's your unit testing framework built in, and that. Whereas again in Java world you'd have to bring in JUnit or something like that. You kind of get all this out of the box. So then trying to do that, becomes 3-4 lines in your makefile rather than here's a whole great big build script where I can make sure I bring in all these dependencies. You still need to make sure that you're kind of pinning your dependency versions, as I said. You're not immune to that. But you're bringing in far less. Like most services have maybe 10 third-party dependencies coming in, not 100.
Yes, yeah. Your risk surface is small, but if you're pinning it and a vulnerability is discovered yesterday, would you know about it today?
Assuming you've been announced, obviously.
Yeah.
So as part of the build thing, it's similar to NPM. You can have that message printed into the command line when it's run it, saying these packages have vulnerabilities, you need to do an update, something like that. There's a certain amount of kind of Boy Scout development that needs to go around it, of fairly regularly checking other updates for some of the more important stuff. Have I got the latest versions? Is there a better package that's come out now that supersedes a package I was using before? And obviously this all features as part of standard software development best practice of clearing up your tech debt, and not having that thing that says temp, update tomorrow, and it's still there 7 years later. Of going in and making sure you are just keeping an eye on things and not letting that grow. Golang by no means solves, you have to do any of that. You still got to make sure you're doing kind of decent software development.
Presumably with Golang, you could actually fail the build if it found or fail the pipeline.
Yeah. So that message that gets printed in the log, you can set it to the exit code at 0.
What about licenses? Because we'll come on to hybrid. I'm intrigued. But obviously you're deploying some software onto your clients, which is then distributed. So then all the copy left and all those sort of licenses kick in. Do you do anything? Does Golang give you anything to check what licenses you've got and compliance?
It's a really good question, and I couldn't tell you because it's currently recording.
Yeah, okay.
But so it's something.
We're only recording. We're not streaming. We can edit whatever.
No, that's fine. So it's something that, and someone might sit hand up, or will say, oh yeah, you can just invoke this command and it tells you things like that. And there are obviously third-party tools for kind of all tool chains really whose job is to tell you that kind of type stuff. What licenses have you got? What you need to make sure you're doing your package licenses, and things like that. So there is tooling around. I couldn't talk about it off the top of my head.
No, it's incredibly common for people not to be checking the licenses. It's also
you kind of assume in where you just can do like npm install blah,
Yeah, oh, that's fine.
That's fine for you to then use, and people know that they're going to use it in a commercial
Yeah.
product or an open source product or a non-commercial personal product and things like that. But yes, there is again a reliance that you need to actually go and check some of these things and make sure you're not in breach and just kind of.
Well, also they change these days, version to version. More perhaps in the .NET world when people are saying, actually, I don't want to make that open source. I want to make money from this now. So they're changing the licenses. So it's worth checking.
Open source and making money are not.
No, they're not.
Opposed
no.
to each other.
We had a very good talk that you can find on the YouTube channel.
On the YouTube channel.
Exactly.
Link here.
Yeah, link there. I can't remember his name. That's really bad, isn't it? On open source and kind of where it's going and why it's good that people are doing some of these things actually. Mm-hmm. But it just makes it more important to check it. Okay. So back to technologies. Golang UI. Using for the UI.
So React.
Okay.
Previously, I mean, I'm not a front-end guy. I would put my hand up and be like, I'm not full stack, I'm not front-end. I'm quite happy sitting in the back-end database side of things. I know what looks good, and I can imagine something in my mind, but actually making that appear is a skill set that I was never born with. So you can do programmer art UIs, and that's what tends to be, this is why I like command line.
Yes.
Terminal looks great. But so Flomation it's React as the front end.
And was that with that in mind, because it made it life easier for you? You could.
I liked the kind of the really componentized way that a lot of modern front end frameworks do. But React was easier for me to call on people that I know who have used it in the past and things. And I'm just then dealing with a single 100-line component, and if I can make that look good, when I bring the whole thing together, it should all look good, or not bad. I wouldn't necessarily say it looks good, but it's not bad.
No, I'm with you.
And in terms of tying into a talent pool, there's a whole community of React devs that you can call on and hire and things like that.
Nice. Okay. Back to your services, not microservices. I would call them microservices, but that's okay. How do you decide this should be its own service?
Typically when it becomes unwieldy to modify something within a service. So Golang has a really nice way of kind of doing its package structure, things like that, where you segregate your code. And when it gets to a point where if I'm changing things here, because Golang's not object-oriented, it's fairly straightforward. If I'm modifying this and I'm having to then go through and change 100 different instances where that's being called, or the file sizes are becoming enormous, or there's loads of different files rather than kind of one or two self-contained files, then I'm thinking, is this now a candidate for being pulled out? So from a development point of view, has this scaled to a point where it would be easier if it was self-contained? And then from an operational point of view, if I've got this service and 10% of it is being absolutely hammered all the time and the other 90% is not doing anything, well, it would make sense to split that 10% out into its own service that can scale and leave the 90% on a nice, cheap, easy to run box, and then have the stuff that's really critical on a nice auto-scaling infrastructure that goes up and down as necessary and expands to the need and the load. That's kind of two, there's dev and the operation side of it, just to split it out.
So it's kind of evolving, it's fair to say, as you're going through.
And I always try and make sure that I do it in such a way that actually splitting it into a service is a case of just pick those folders up, drop them in the new service, and it's up and running. So it shouldn't take too much effort to actually go, well, this set of packages now within this service needs to split out. It should just be a case of, well, it's kind of just cut from there, drop into this new service I've created with all kind of the standardized boilerplate that I put together for configuration and listening and ports and stuff like that, and certificates, and then up and it's up and running nice and easy.
Nice. So your code architecture is kind of matching and supporting that.
That's the plan.
I'm
going now and go and load up the code like this is a horrible mess. I've chatted nonsense for an hour.
We'll come on to that.
Yay!
So, stick with the services for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing for error detection, performance monitoring, knowing that there's an issue in there that you need to deal with?
So Flomation, when it's stuff that we're hosting, as I mentioned, on the on-prem side of things, all of the logs go up to CloudWatch on AWS. So it's all hosted on AWS, it's all EC2 instances with auto-scaling groups and that. All of the logs redirect to CloudWatch, which then means it's really, really easy for us to set up alerts for these errors are being printed into the logs. Let's cache this here. We've got a service that goes and just kind of pings all the services to make sure they're all still up and running as soon as they stop responding, or if they take too long to respond, so if like the P99 response jumps across a threshold, maybe this is under load or something's going on. A common one kind of across my career is actually it's not your service that's the problem, it's the databases your service is talking to is under load or connection start or something like that. So your code, you're looking at your logs and it's all looking fine, like, there's nothing happening. It's because all the threads or whatever are sat there waiting for data back from the database. Your CPU and database are maxed out. So by having everything in kind of the AWS ecosystem or the GCP ecosystem that provide dashboarding tools and monitoring and alerting kind of off the bat, it removes a headache or a decision point of, well, what third-party tool are we going to bring in for that monitoring? Oh, now I've got to go and spend ages, albeit beautiful, but developing Grafana dashboards to alert and things and stuff like that. It will look beautiful, but I have to go and sit there and design things like that. Whereas I can just be like AWS, CloudWatch, dashboard, done.
And as far as I understand, many of those other tools just automatically connect into CloudWatch. If you want to change it one day, CloudWatch will kind of host the metrics, and then if we want to put a different front end to that data, as you say, a lot of the kind of the tooling that's out there, you just put it as a source, go and do that, and then make it look pretty. Yeah. So that's the important thing about monitoring, making sure it looks pretty. It's got to be enjoyable to look at.
Well, you need to be able to have a screenshot you can send to your C-suite or whatever, and be like, look, everything's green across the board, it looks amazing. And if you kind of send them just like terminal monospace font that says it's all okay, it's not quite as inspiring.
Yeah, no, that is true. Visibility is probably what you would call it, but making it pretty for the C-suite is another way to do it. Presumably, I don't know CloudWatch perfectly, but presumably you can enable things in there for suspicious or unusual kind of execution paths or patterns.
Not directly kind of off the bat. AWS, and again, I suspect all the cloud vendors will have similar tools for intrusion detection and kind of security alerting around behavior across the whole thing, so not just necessarily CloudWatch. It will also tie into network traffic going to boxes and stuff like that, and start to get really, really clever. And it's a little bit beyond my scope, because there's a whole career and department around that kind of security alerting and monitoring beyond just kind of being a good developer. And what you and I would think, oh, that's just normal behaviour. Like, no, that's me. That's a hacker that's trying to do bad things. So there are tools available. We don't currently tie in directly with anything like that.
Do you see that as being, because presumably that, I mean, you're hoping to target the likes of HMRC or large corporates who will have kind of stringent security. Are you looking at anything like ISO 27001 or SOC Type 2 or any of those kind of certificates? We're doing a good job, sort of.
So ISO 27001 is the question that's always going to be there, and is, if you go on the website, is slated for next year. Okay. So it's on the roadmap. We are talking about this company in Chester that I've already started a conversation with.
Give you support for it.
That will be there. The problem is it's a very stringent, just by the very nature of it, certification, and there's a lot of paperwork upon it. Technically solving ISO 27001 is probably the easier part of it. Putting tooling in place.
If you're a decent dev, just
for any kind of IT department, making sure that you can't root onto a box and firewalls are enabled and those sorts of things. That's probably the easy part of it. Having all of the IT user policies and every month doing a risk analysis and documenting this and having a risk register and having a named person, for an SME is a lot of overhead to get that. And obviously your larger companies kind of just do it by default. There are whole departments that are just geared on certifying this for ISO 27001.
But you're looking at outsourcing some of that though, to give you that sort of support.
Yeah, so as I said, there's a company that we've already I've worked with previously, which will be our partner for ISO 27001, and they will come in and advise you're not quite up to standard here, or this is doing really well, and then every year then you do your pen tests and your certification and your drive runs. As if, imagine something had gone wrong, how do you prove that you've got the evidence that you did have risk mitigation in place and that sort of type thing. So yeah, it's not something that I would want to do alone.
No.
Having a partner at that point. They're the domain experts.
And they might also be able to offer fractional roles to say, actually, we can do that for you. So yeah. No, okay, that's all very sensible. How on earth are you doing this hybrid thing then? So what runs on-prem?
Yep.
And what runs SaaS?
So because you can run the entire stack on-prem.
Yeah. Okay.
You could run any bit, but the typical.
So are you using containers there for that? Is that
both. So you can. Again, another benefit of what I like about Golang is that it's all statically compiled. Okay. So what you get out of your build process is a single binary.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about a bunch of other stuff installed in the OS to get it running. Yeah. Like that. So you can just provide. Each service has a binary that you can download and run on Ubuntu, Debian, whatever it is. We also provide hardened Dockerized containers. Versions of it. So if you don't want to run binaries direct on your box and you've got a Kubernetes cluster, or you want to run it yourself in your own cloud on ECS or something like that, here's Docker containers. You can then do all your own security inspection on, make sure that there aren't a bunch of vulnerabilities that people are doing on that version of Alpine or whatever you built the image on. So it's flexible as to the deployment method. So the hybrid, kind of going back to your original question, the hybrid model typically we receive a control plane in the cloud. So the UI, the security, the identity,
the Lego blocks,
the actual edit, because that means you can easily edit it on your phone, your tablet, sit on the train, go, oh yeah, I want to change that flow. But then when it's actually executing and running that task, so the runner then that does it, we would expect to see it on-prem.
So how does that connection work?
So
the
runner,
figure that on SaaS.
Yeah, so the runner connects up to the API, so it's an outbound connection to pull stuff down. So the API is not needing to push into your environment.
Yeah.
Your infrastructure reaches out, so all you actually
have to
do is
polls and all that.
you need to, allow an outbound connection on a Squid proxy or something to a website. It's a REST call effectively that it goes and does. So if you have a mechanism for things already on-prem for going out to the internet, it's a single URL that you're able to whitelist to allow access, and it's under your control as to how often that polls, say if there's a job available, when that runs, scale it out so it doesn't run overnight, because that's a bit suspicious running things at 2 in the morning potentially, depending on your workloads and stuff like that. And you can then scale those runners to as many as you want, or just have one. You can have certain flows run on certain, so the Flomation has a concept of queues. So runners are part of a queue, flows run on queues, so you can have any number of runners behind a queue, but you might have like a super secure queue that is in this data center here, and that's got access to all this finalized data. Okay. But actually some of your noddy BAU type stuff can run elsewhere. So then when you're building your flows, you tell it which queue it's part of.
So this is one of those to run it on the secure side.
Exactly. So then you can kind of segregate that, where things run, what access these different boxes have, what they can go out and connect to this database server or connect to this API, and you don't end up with, let's download everyone's finance records, let's go stick it up on Facebook.
Yeah.
That kind of type of control around it. And we've also built, because I think it's really, really critical from a public sector point of view, that enterprise runners of that, and in the process of continuing to build and evolve really strict compliance and auditing tools. So you can see every edit that was made on the flow, who did that, when it was executed, set up alerts around when flows were executed. Maybe this onboarding a new employee, if it runs outside the hours of 8 AM to 8 PM Monday to Friday, looks a bit sus. Why are you trying to onboard an employee at 2 in the morning on a Saturday? Maybe perfectly fine for some businesses, but a lot of businesses are like, oh, actually, it's a bit interesting. Why is somebody doing that kind of type thing? You can selectively enable and disable plugins. So if your organisation, for example, is very much, we do not allow AI, then you can turn off all of the ChatGPT, the Gemini, the Anthropic integration plugins, so that they don't even appear then in the list. When someone's trying to build something, you can't go and run the ChatGPT node because it's been turned off.
Nice. Yeah.
So again, your IT director or your security guy is like, okay, I've got a bit more control, I'm a bit happier with that.
Can you put in approval steps to say actually? Well, I presume you've got role-based access, so that only certain people can deploy things to the secure node over there. And
so there's role-based access around.
Say you're not authorised to finish that and say make it so. Somebody else can double check it for you first.
We've talked about it. It's not in currently, but yeah, the same way that you would double check a blog post or something before it gets published or something like that. We have thought about do we want an approval step. It gets very complicated with flows that are already published, but then you go through and edit. It's from kind of creating something and then I use a second stage approval to push it. It's a fairly simple process. If you've already got something, then someone comes in and edits it, and then waits for approval, but then someone else comes in and edits what's currently live and not the approved version. You then got this nice web of trying to mix things and merge them together, and is there a conflict? So then you just lock it and then you go back to the good old days of Perforce and whatever that old source control was that Microsoft did. We had to lock files and check them out.
Source safe.
How is it source safe? God, we're like PTSD now. Go back to that. But
it's all right, everybody. We're not using source safe. It's okay. Just bring it back again. We've just put everybody down.
There's no source control. It's a USB stick. It's in my pocket now. Shared file. But yeah, because then you start getting really complex mechanisms around how do you manage that sort of locking, which is why it's not in currently, but we have had the conversation around it.
Yeah, but I mean, you're not. Yeah, well, we'll talk about your product development, but you're not live yet, so
no.
You wouldn't expect it to be fully.
We all finished, day one.
Yeah. The connection from on-prem to SaaS. How do you secure that?
It's HTTPS. We haven't implemented it yet, but there will be mutual TLS auth that you could enable, so you have certificates on both sides to make sure that runner is actually that thing. As the default onboarding mechanism is that the queues have a registration code, so you have to give the runner that code, so it knows what queue is subscribed to.
So it calls up and says.
And when it does that, it gets authorized and passed back then a whole bunch of unique kind of secure identifiers and things like that, which is then how it actually communicates with the API server.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of its initial connection will say,
I want to join queue XYZ.
How do you stop something else?
Here
and now, man in the middle, seeing that somehow. I mean, HBS will cover a lot of that, but
yeah, it does cover a lot of it. And you've got things like HTTPS pinning and stuff like that. That if you switch out the certificate, it will immediately fail the connection and stuff like that. So, but obviously a lot of organisations do fun things with secure HTTP connections to look at stuff and wildcard assert it and when you browse on homes and things like that. So, I mean, we can't solve every problem, but because you're kind of in control of your hardware, like if you're that concerned that someone's going to snoop a one-time code going up, chances are you're probably going to end up running the whole stack on-prem anyway. If you're that secure,
that's fair.
Concern, and then you've got full control over that end-to-end anyway.
Yeah. That's right, mate. It's going well. You did all right. So the other thing then is deployments.
Yes.
Because at some point you're going to have hundreds, maybe thousands, hopefully tens of thousands of customers.
Yes.
And you're going to be updating the runners. You're going to be updating them, or maybe there's a security fix you need to push out. What's your plan for rolling out updates to all the various customers that you might have?
So if they're on SaaS, it's all shared.
Yeah.
So it's not a sort of
so it's like a multi-tenant.
So
implementation.
Again, this comes back to good design and make sure you don't kind of break your interface and things like that. But the idea is that you wouldn't ever get yourself in a situation where the new version of the API service, for example, an older version of the runner could no longer talk to it because you
give it backwards.
So you need to make sure you keep your kind of your backwards compatibility. And then it's a case of running Terraform, because it's all the whole infrastructure is kind of defined in Terraform, which will then bring the latest Docker container or the latest binary down, and then as you then scale down, you scale the group and scale it back up again, the new ones will have the latest version come down, which then also means you've got a really robust rollback policy of something monumentally has gone horribly wrong, scale it back down, pick the last binary, your n-1 binary, scale it back up again, and within a few minutes in theory, you're back to the old version because you've been able to roll back.
That's the SaaS version. What about the on-prem?
We make the binaries available as a download link, It's gated behind a user account, but only so that we can track how many times we've downloaded. We don't charge to download the binaries. That's not the model we're going for on-prem.
No.
So then it's up to your department as to how you want to do kind of a rolling update for Docker containers or the binaries and things like that. We would recommend that again you deploy the stack in a kind of a reproducible way via some form of infrastructure as code, Terraform, something like that, so that you can very easily just change the version of the URL or whatever it is to then scale back up again. And we are going to provide kind of like a reference architecture in Terraform for here's how you deploy the stack. Done.
That's what we recommend. Nice. Yeah. So that helps. But how will you avoid? I mean, obviously it's early days yet. But how will you avoid the situation where that client over there haven't updated for 5 years and they're coming at you saying something's not working?
So the model we're going for on-prem is paid for support.
Okay.
And as part of that, there'll be an update, a kind of managed update available. Yeah. But also there'll be a case of, well, you're on a 5-year-old version, like our engineers can't support that.
Yeah.
You need to
we'll only support N-1 or something.
Exactly. Yeah. There'll be kind of long-term support versions, and we'll kind of carve line in the sand saying, this is the 2025 version. Nice. And we will guarantee we'll support this for the next 3 years or something at some point in time. But at some point it will have to be end of life and kind of sunsetted and moved on, because you can't indefinitely support, again as a smaller organisation, you can't indefinitely support every version increment you've ever published.
You'd be surprised what I've seen people supporting hundreds of versions because they didn't.
Yes, I mean,
that sounds good.
Again, some of the public sector work that I've been involved in is using versions of OSs and software tools that are kind of very dated.
Yeah.
And long, like end of life doesn't even describe it. It's like end of century.
Yes.
Kind of type technologies, and it's there because it's a legacy system that has done the job, and especially in public sector, you're not going to get a minister to sit there and go, let's do this 5-year job that's going to cost billions, and if it goes wrong, it's my head, and I'll never be in office to see the benefit. So this is why it continues going. So it's well aware of kind of legacy systems.
See the pitfalls.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. I'm loving this, but we probably need to move on. But I want to cover two other things off quickly before we do. Have you looked at non-functional requirements? Not all. Have you looked at non-functional requirements? You know what sort of load, hosting cost, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So the SaaS model.
Yes. Yeah.
Because when it comes to kind of load and that area of NFRs.
But just presumably, if it's on-prem, it's not.
Yes, that's what it is. The kind of the NFR side of things when it's on-prem is not our issue. It's if it's slow, you upgrade your hardware or whatever it's kind of type thing. Obviously, if there's an issue with the software, then we'll deal with it. But
that's recorded. That's fine. We'll look after it. We will look after it.
Your server's 6 months old, get rid of it. Finance director's crying at your capex. But from a SaaS point of view, we bill based on minutes of usage.
Okay.
So we have factored in enough of a margin with kind of the billing that if we have people that are on the packages that would cause enough load, there's enough money there, basically, kind of getting down to it, to cover then the scale of service required.
When I get called out.
We're not going to suddenly wake up the next morning to 1,000 servers have been spun up because of load. Where's that coming from? Because actually, for that to have reached that point, customers would have had to have opted into a certain level of subscription that would allow them to do that in the first place. And this will be continuously monitored. Obviously, cloud costs go up and down quite regularly, and we can keep monitoring. And there's a healthy buffer to make sure that anything that hasn't been accounted for, any surprises, is handled.
Yeah, fluctuations will be.
But typically costs tend to trend downwards, whereas usage tends to trend upwards. So from a business point of view, it should be a good success.
And you've got auto scaling in there because you're in the cloud. Do you do any testing of that to be sure that you're okay on month 1 and 12 months time you'll still be okay?
To an extent. because
you've got a lot of monitoring. It's not.
Yeah, so I mean, we should always know ahead of time if stuff's starting to ramp up. I tend to put in fairly healthy kind of scaling policies in that, once it's over 50% of load, it's when it starts to scale. So I'm not kind of pushed to, well, it's 95%, now we get another thing, and it sort of starves your scaling group. Try and do it in a fairly kind of healthy point of view that way. In terms of then kind of load testing, is something that we do a bit of. It's difficult. It's difficult to try and mirror what real world users do at times, because you can just spin up, a bunch of servers that then execute a test script that go and just hits the page repeatedly, but that's not a real world use. Really, you don't just have a bunch of people suddenly turn up and load the same page repeatedly or submit the same login details, because then they end up getting cached and things like that. It doesn't really work. So a way I've tried to approach things in the past is to try and record user journeys and the most common user journey, and kind of replay that as a way of doing things, because I guarantee you what I think will be the standard way of using a tool is not how users will use the tool. I've done this enough times now. Users will do their own thing, and I will never have been able to predict it. So it's actually better to try and take those behaviours, kind of historic behaviour, and then try and replay those. Well, imagine that instead of this one person doing this, imagine there's 100 of these people doing that, 1,000. So we're looking, and obviously there's a lot of work still to do around this, about how we record that kind of behaviour, and then we can replay it in a secure and anonymised way. And it's not, that's Fran doing that, I'm going to pretend there's 100 Frans doing the same thing.
Because I will not be doing the same things most people do. Yeah, okay. Technical debt.
Yes.
It's a new product, developing quickly.
There is none.
There is none?
No.
I don't believe you. And if there was none, that probably wouldn't be a good decision. There must be times where you thought, actually, do you know what, I'm going to consciously take that on board now, because at some point I've got to make money from this.
Yeah.
How do you approach that balance?
So I am very much a pragmatist when it comes to software development. Like, you get kind of die-hard purists of it must be done this way, we're not releasing until we do it exactly this way.
They never release.
And they never release, and then they run out of money, or you go back to your investors or whatever, and be like, please have some more money, and then eventually nothing happens. But at the same time, what you don't want to do is rush and shovel shite out the door, because then there's reputational damage, there's product damage, things like that. So a healthy balance between good enough.
Yeah.
Whatever the old phrasing is, that perfect is the enemy of good, or done, or something like that. I'd rather shovel good stuff out the door that's maybe not quite how I want it to be, but is good enough for what other people want from it, rather than waiting until it's this perfect golden thing, because then, as you say, it'll never go out the door. But there's an element of, well, let's take a bit of pride in this as well. We don't want to just push something that looks rubbish out.
Yeah. Do you log any of that? Do you record that to say, actually, do you know what, we put that out, that's going to be fine, but in 6 months' time, that might not be fine, I might want to look at that?
Yes. So we use Linear for task tracking. I've moved away from the Atlassian suite of things that tend to be the de facto standard. But so Linear is simply just a task tracking tool. They every month a new feature appears, and you can kind of see the route it's heading. But for now, it's great at logging those tasks. And as soon as we come across a thing of this isn't quite how we want it, or we've spoken to the customer and could this be done a different way, it's just getting into that habit of let's stick a ticket in. It can sit in the backlog for a year, but at least let's put it in and have the conversation or the email linked to it, so that when I go back, I'm not sat there going, I cannot for the life of me remember what do X, Y, Z means, because I've lost the context of it because my memory is terrible.
Yeah.
Or when the team scales up or we bring other people in, they've got all the context around why a decision was made. Like, I'm sure all of us have gone into a code base or a new job or things like that and gone, oh God, this is a pile of shite. Why on earth did they do it this way?
What are they doing?
And I tend to try and approach it more from the point of view of the person developing that a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. in that moment in time was making the best decision that they thought they could at that point in time with the information available to them. Whether that be a choice of technology, whether that be they've got a manager screaming down their back and it just needs to get out the door, whatever it is, they've not decided to maliciously write terrible code or push out a bad release or take something down. So I don't sit there and go, oh God, that Dave bloke must have been utterly rubbish. No wonder he's still here. He must have been sacked. I'd rather approach it from he's made a decision. It's now time to review that decision. And is there now a better product? Is there a better package? Can this be rewritten in a different way? Is this no longer meeting the requirements? Because obviously things are great at the time, but then as soon as you scale, the way something was done is maybe not necessarily how it should have been done. And at that point in time is not tech debt. It's fine. It kind of becomes tech debt now of rewrite the auth service, because it no longer scales to the needs that you've got, and that changes over time.
Yeah.
Pragmatism.
And how? It's a good answer. It's a good answer. How will you monitor that though over time? So something you've written today. I mean, all Daves are quite happy to let them off the hook there and gave them. But the Andys of the world.
Yeah.
You wrote something today.
Yeah.
In a year's time, in 6 months' time, how will you know that actually, do you know what, I need to revisit that?
Either because it has demonstrated itself to now become a problem. Yeah. Your users
it's
are
harder to change it.
It's harder to change. It feels.
Again,
I'm sure many of us have had to work on things that felt like treacle, just like wading through trudge or like a marsh to try and get anything done. Or you see the ticket land on your desk and you're like, I really don't want to do that.
I don't want to
go and touch that, and it's really flaky and breaks everything. Or there's 1,000 tests that are going to break and update. And so you kind of get that feel from your team when you're sat in a room plotting stuff out and going through your backlog refinement and stuff like that. And it's like, well, okay, if everyone in this room is like, I don't want to touch that service or I don't want to touch that function, maybe that's scope to, well, let's do a spike and see what might be a better way of doing this. Again, your customers will tell you as well, I find it really hard to pay money because your flow, your process takes 20 steps. Well, okay, well, at the time it made sense, but now we don't need this, so let's remove some of the steps and that kind of thing. Generally I go with the feel. Does it feel?
No, I think that's right. One of my favourite questions to ask people is whereabouts in your code base do you dread getting a bug for? Where does your stomach hit the floor when you see that?
As soon as you hear you've got to touch service X or whatever, your heart just sings. Going off to rip it out and get something else instead. If you're recurring, if you're constantly having that same feeling around the same section across multiple people, it's probably a really good candidate for the refactor.
I'm actually only 5 minutes behind. I'm quite testing. I want to just touch on testing though. You're a sole developer on this, aren't you?
No, there's a couple of us doing it. So again, one of the great things about Golang is it has a built-in unit integration testing framework straight out of the bat as soon as you've got the stuff installed, and it's really nice to use as well.
Integration as in testing a small cluster of your services together, or?
So spin up your REST server, your REST interface, go and call it. Does it go off and do kind of your whole stack, go into the stuff? Maybe you've switched in the database connection behind the scenes, so it's not going off to a real database, it's an in-memory type thing. But kind of doing the whole stack. Because a lot of...
so at that point, so you're coming into the API...
At the same point at which it would in the real world.
In the real world,
so
it's not a UI test.
UI testing is a whole beast all on its own.
Yes.
And trying to simulate browsers and stuff like that, which I find difficult, and kind of in like a previous life it would have been, we'll just spin up Selenium and we'll record this script to go and do this.
And you have to change it every time you make a change.
And it was great 10, 15 years ago when everything was like, they're only ever going to load it in Chrome on a desktop with a monitor that's 1920 by 1080. Now everything's mobile first, tablet first, across 3-4 different OSs or browsers. And if you kind of do a matrix of all those things, all of a sudden you've got to run that same test 100 times for various screen resolutions, different browsers, different technologies and all that sort of stuff. You ideally need ideally should be running it on different network connections. So, is it on Wi-Fi on a phone? Is it a 3G connection? Is it, a degraded connection with very high latency? How well does it actually behave? That's an entire product on its own to provide that level of testing. It's not pretty.
No. I think that I've seen a triangle where you have unit tests at the bottom, API test, integration test, and then like a small number of end-to-end UI tests to just verify that things are doing what they should do.
And I think one of the best ways of handling those kind of end-to-end unit tests, UI tests, are this is your final sense check that you do yourself in your QA environment of, have I broken the registration flow? Well, let's load up, QA.blah, register new user. Oh shit, the button's disappeared. Which yes, you could write a UI test to tell you that the register button has disappeared will require 100 steps to get you to that point. But you just going and sense checking, going okay. And if you've got 10 really critical user journeys that you just rattle through for every release, the impact in terms of resourcing and people doing it is fairly minimal. I wouldn't say sit there and run 1,000 UI user journey end-to-end tests manually, do the really critical stuff, and then rely on your automated testing, because obviously it's all kind of foundational. If you've got really good unit test coverage, so your functions are kind of doing what they should be doing, and you've got really good integration testing where you kind of bring a bit more into it, and then really good interface testing that your APIs are doing what they're supposed to do and they can talk and things like that. In theory, you should never reach a point at the top of that triangle where something is catastrophically broken. Like it should have been flagged up way sooner.
Cheaper test.
In a far cheaper test, far kind of more left in the timeline of build and things like that. So if you get that, and I'm not sitting here going, you have to have 100% unit test coverage. And
well, that's what I was going to say. So that's good talk.
Yeah.
How do you monitor that is actually implemented? What's your strategy for ensuring that the tests are at the right level, you've got the right number in the right place?
So fairly standard ways of kind of printing out code coverage, let's say, which then we use GitLab as our build pipelines, things like that, and we can get the badges and all that kind of type thing, and then post into Slack. And in theory, no merge request or PR should ever reduce that coverage. It should always go up. So
as a percentage.
As a percentage of coverage, you should never. If you're going to introduce another 1,000 lines of code to a service, you're going to take a massive hit on coverage if you then don't test those 1,000 lines. So you need to make sure that you've got your test to cover that. But this is again, it comes back to kind of Boy Scout development of when you're doing your merge requests and things like that, making sure that actually your colleague has done the unit test. Has the coverage been improved? How do you cover these use cases? Actually, is there an edge case that you've not thought of, they've not thought of, that you could offer an opinion on, and going through and nitpicking about names of variables, or how you've architected this for loop or something, I don't believe is kind of the purpose of peer review and merge requests and that kind of type thing. It's more have you thought about if a user comes in and types in skibbity dibbity dibbity as their email address, have you got validation on that field? Have you what happens if it gets fired up in? Have you got a more defensive way of writing this code? So it's more of an intellectual discussion rather than a technical pick apart the syntax and the naming of variables approach.
Really valuable stuff that everybody does because it's nice and easy.
Again, got tales from the career of merge requests taking a week to merge because the senior dev was refusing to approve things because a variable was named X instead of Y. And so this is not a productive use of time.
So let's go off on a tangent. So that's good. You've got a small number of devs, it's nice and easy because you're all bought in, highly engaged, happy little team. As you start to add in more devs and the product grows, have you thought about how you're going to maintain that sort of culture and that sort of quality? Or is that, to be fair, your early stage, that might be way up in the future.
So depending on, I am a massive fan, this is going to come as a shock to you based on the tool I'm building, I'm a massive fan of automation. So,
I was going to ask actually, are you using your tool to automate things?
That is the goal. So we currently use GitLab as our build and our kind of Git service. The idea is that Git will become sort of purely source control, and we won't use Git runners or pipelines, GitLab runners or pipelines to build the tool. Flow will build the tool. and then deploy it and scale it and things like that. I had a great phrase the other day. Obviously, we're kind of all familiar with eating your own dog food, and I was like, oh, I like the idea. I want to eat your own dog food. Yeah. And I heard, I can't remember where it was on a podcast or something like that. And we don't use that phrase. We drink our own champagne. Yeah. I like that. Just rephrase it. It's not dog food. It's not something yucky. It's it's the good stuff. Yeah. I like that.
It's really easy to sell to your customers.
Yeah. It's much nicer when you sit in front of a board of investors or customers. Yeah. We drink our own champagne, not kibble that's in a bowl on the floor. So it's a big fan of automation, and I think it's potentially got different uses, but super important on a small team because it takes over loads of the heavy lifting. Mm-hmm. But then as you scale, it's super important from the other kind of side of things. Of it means that you don't all have to kind of get in a room and understand something because it's done a lot of the legwork, and you can just then do the little bit that you've added on top. So it's the more automation, push button, get vacant, that you can do in any kind of build process is always a winner in my eyes.
Okay. Yeah, trick.
This is the heavy stuff coming. This is the heavy stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of the tool, so you talked about tooling. Sorry, I'm pausing because I wonder whether we can hold that. I'm reordering things as I go. Mm-hmm. How do you work? So let's talk about the team.
Yes.
Are you using Scrum, Shape Up, Kanban? How do you organise? Yeah, it's all
kids are doing. Is it? It's what your kids are doing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. This is where I definitely.
So not Shape Up.
No, it's not Shape Up. No. So I guess the closest would be Kanban.
Yeah.
It's a list of tasks in various states that kind of move from the left to the right hand board. From a process of being done to finished. If you were to go and kind of do 2-week sprints and retros and backlog refinement and things like that, when there's two of you, you spend a long time in meetings and ceremonies for the sake of it.
You should look at Shape Up. So from what I hear,
so kind of
it's overkill.
It is overkill. There is a team size that you reach that I think it works well. Yeah, probably about 6-7 people kind of point where it reaches. But I've found historically it requires you to have a really, really good product manager or scrum master or someone like that kind of devs don't want to do the admin.
No.
So you need someone to kind of corral devs and kind of keep them on focus and on task and run the ceremonies in a really efficient way. Because again, devs are the first people that will just switch off and be like, I'm bored of this meeting, why are we all sat here? Look, there's a bird flying past the window. And, it's 5 points. Yeah. What's the story point? Like, no, don't get me started on that. For a small team, kind of Kanban-esque to-do list works great. But then you perhaps need a bit more reporting and structure.
Well, that's what I was going to wonder really. Is how do you then, how do you know things are going well and are on track? And because presumably you have milestone deadlines, things to hit as you're going through. Mm-hmm. How do you keep track to know that is where you are and you haven't had some curveball come in or somebody's having a rough week?
Realistically, it comes back to a little bit of pragmatism. Yeah. There's a developer I know I've known for years and he hates the phrase deadline. People don't die if you don't develop your software on time. It's not a deadline.
Yeah.
It's a sad line. And it's like, I love that. And it's very, very few of us will ever be working on code that if it isn't done, there's a risk to life.
Yeah.
We're not building defibrillators. It's not, submarine code or whatever. If the e-commerce website that we're working on ships a day late, it's not the end of the world. Your C-suite, your whatever's will make it out like.
Someone is writing a check though every month.
Yeah.
And they're going to be wondering, how am I going to write checks?
Software dev is inherently kind of a I don't want to say non-deterministic. There will always be speed bumps, bump in the road. The great one, especially in the kind of the more modern era where it's no longer just a box product that you stick on a disk and ship out to customers, is you have customers actively using the tool and finding a problem. So you've got this beautifully designed 2-week sprint and velocity, you take into account everyone's leave and day you're going to go bowling, stuff like that, and then your highest paying customer comes in and goes, several on fault, shit's broken. It's like, well, okay, well, my sprint's going out the window now because I've got to now spend the next 2 days trying to fix a problem. So you kind of have to build in then that wiggle room, you know, and the way I've done this in the past is obviously you just have to 50% of your capacity of your team or something like that. And if they finish all the tasks, then you bring more stuff in. But if something big drops from a support point of view, you pick it up, and it, you know, there are ways of doing it, but I think you have to.
Well, how are you doing it? Because you said it's a pragmatic approach. So what do you take to say?
I don't
to
stick
know,
to hard and fast deadlines.
But how do you know that you are reaching something? Do you know what I mean? How do you know that you're not wasting your time?
So we've just spent about 2 weeks ago 2 days down in London at the Digital Government Expo. So at a stand, you know, TV and demo of the tool and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was equally terrifying and invigorating to kind of put ourselves out there, having not released a product yet at all, when like the stand next to us was Red Hat, and over there was Capgemini, and you know these sorts of tools that little old Flomation with my quote on the wall that I stole from Einstein and then put my name next to.
What's the quote?
Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting something different is the definition of madness, or whatever it is. And people kept coming down, I'm sure Einstein said that, so there's no actual proof he said it. And I don't think he's going to sue me for copyright infringement. So it, you know, it said Flomation 2025 next to it, and it was a great way to start a conversation. But it was really terrifying to kind of go up into this kind of public sector expo with, you know, thousands of people turning up every day and kind of heads of departments or your DWPs, your HMRC, your home office, cabinet office, these sorts of types of things. But then it was really, really invigorating because every single person we spoke to, and like everyone has that job they have to do every week, that they wake up in the morning, I'm going to do my mileage. And everyone's gone, yes, I've got that report I spent hours on for Bob, my line manager.
Yeah.
This tool could solve that problem. So it was really kind of gratifying to, never even released the tool yet, talk to people and be like, yes, there is a problem here we're going to go and solve. So making sure you kind of keep customer in that feedback loop is how you realise that you're progressing, I think. It's really easy for developers because we're typically fairly introverted and like to sit, you know, in our basement on our laptop working from home.
Definitely what we feel is important.
But then we throw it over the fence. We've done our task, it moves to the done column in Jira or whatever, and then we never see it again. It's really important to actually get that feedback back from the customer, whether it be direct, I really love this feature, or you're looking at kind of your reporting and like, why is no one using that feature? We spent 3 weeks developing that thing, why is no one using it? Well, is it because it's not signposted properly, the button's not there, is it not described properly?
So I mean that's something in itself though. So you're monitoring usage of the actual tool to see
so I think if you'd spoken to me 20 years ago, I'd want to just code my feature and be done with it. But as I've gotten older and more mature in my career and things like that, I'm a massive one for metrics. Yeah. And I love being able to know that actually a particular feature is being used or not being used. So in the example of flow, we can run a report to know how many different flows and how often a particular plugin is invoked. Like how many people are using the HTTP request node, and come back and be like, oh, there's 2,500 instances of this. Cool. How many people are using the ChatGPT node? None. And it's like, cool. Not going to bother putting any dev time on like refining that. I'll keep going on that and make that one a better experience. Because you know, if I can fix that for 10% of people, 2,500, well, that's great. That's a good chunk of people. 10% of 0 is still 0. Good math. You know, so it's really important to have those, and there's obviously the third-party tools that you can kind of instrument your UI with and things like that to check this. I find it really simple and easy, and I've done it with kind of previous products, to just have a really simple bit of JavaScript and post an event, and you store it in a database. And if you then want to query, you're going to do something afterwards. You can potentially go down a route of buying in a tool, and you spend longer setting up the tool or paying for the tool or configuring the tool, then you actually kind of get value out of it. But if you can kind of at least capture the events from day one, whether you do anything with them from day one is you've got the data sat in the database doing something. You know, you can never get missing historic data. You can always add stuff in moving forward, but it's always good to know what on earth has happened for the last 6 months. So kind of having it from day one, I think, is really, really critical.
Coming back to this no deadlines.
Yeah, satellites.
So you've got good customer engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Customer says this is fantastic. I'm really looking forward to that feature.
Mm-hmm.
I presume you're giving them updates. How do you tell them we're about halfway through, or we're about 3/4 of the way through? How does that actually physically work? Because there's two scenarios. One is they're just happy. Joe, when this comes along, that's going to save us this much time. Fantastic. Can't wait for it.
Mm-hmm.
They might get a bit frustrated if it takes a year, or it might take 6 months. Or there might be another case where they're thinking, actually, if we're going to use this, it has to be in before the next financial year, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They might have something that says, how do you manage those scenarios? I'm not trying to trip you up.
No. So, under promise, over deliver is a really easy answer to say. I am a stickler for fake it till you make it. So I will promise the world I will stick to people and then find a way to do it. If it means I don't sleep for 2 weeks, I won't sleep for 2 weeks. But that is not a sustainable way of running a business necessarily. Yeah. So, what you need to do is kind of be realistic, and I think customers will appreciate kind of being open and frank about, we're not going to do that by the end of the month. We just can't do it. I'm off on holiday to Disneyland for 2 weeks. It's not going to get done. And they'll appreciate that. I think if you've got a customer that's really stickler and is going to pull out because of something kind of as simple as it needs to be there by March 31st and not the 1st of April, they're probably not necessarily a customer you want. It is a strain way more into business side than tech side of things. Not all. I'm very conscious that we're in like a cost of living crisis, and profits are down for everyone under that. Not every pound is worth the same, and I'd rather have a bunch of customers that are really good partners to work with for a little bit less money than one utter pain in the arse customer just because there's a few more zeros on the contract or something like that, because you're only looking at top line figure then. But if I'm getting a call out every night because they've got yet another Sev1 error, critical failure, which is actually just a user error or something like that, but every night I'm getting a call and the wife and kids are getting fed up and my phone's constantly going at dinner and things like that, that's not worth that. I would rather make sure that we deliver what we say we will deliver, when we say we'll deliver it, without putting loads of undue stress on kind of me and the team and everything like that. And if it hopefully will mean that you end up with really good relationships with your customers, you will have people that won't be happy with that. But in the long run, probably great if they jump ship, and go, all right, this is not a tool for us, we'll go over to blah.
Curate a bunch of lovely customers.
Yeah.
No,
I
say this flippantly, but I don't mean it flippantly. It's
no. Again, my DNA is a software developer sat in the basement, not wanting to talk to people. But as I've kind of gotten older and started to build businesses and things like that, I always wanted to see kind of my customers and me more as and it's going to sound proper cliched, more as a relationship and a partnership, and it's not me working, selling a coffee behind a bar kind of type thing to a person, very transactional. I'd rather kind of build something together that, yes, they pay me to do, but they're not paying me to do something just for the sake of paying me to do something. They're paying me to do something that will make their life easier or increase their productivity or their turnover or reduce, overhead and that kind of type thing. So it's better to work together. It's not a zero-sum game of I take, and you get nothing of benefit. It's it's a let's build something better together. Greater than the sum of its parts kind of type thing is how I've always wanted to approach kind of business and things like that.
nice.
Ask me in a year's time when I'm bankrupt and can't pay the exorbitant AWS bills.
Okay. How are we doing time-wise? Probably a little bit over.
Need a flow to remind you.
Don't like those. So, finally then, talk about how you came up with the idea, the business side of things as we were talking about.
Yeah.
How you came up with the idea, how you gained funding for this, because obviously you're paying people, hopefully you're paying yourself, you're at least covering your mortgage. And then how that idea kind of, you built that, money for that, built out a roadmap for that, and kind of.
So previous companies I've been involved in, we've gone down the kind of the VC funding and getting investment and grants from the UK government, things like that. And it's great because you suddenly get this huge stack of cash that appears in your bank account. You can run off to Indeed to put a job at that, hire people. But you still need to make sure then you're even more beholden then to building your product, getting it out, and getting a customer to pay for it. Yeah. And you perhaps blur the objective then to not wanting to build a good product and get it to your customers to I need money coming in because I need to, I've got investors breathing down my neck, or why is there no, Q4 earnings report that's been written yet? No, it's still zero, mate. So myself and my co-founder Dave kind of had this conversation when we were plotting and scheming and coming up with it of that's not the route we wanted to do with this. So we wanted to try and bootstrap it for as long as possible. So we are kind of self-funding the development currently, and covering the bills, and we have both been involved in very large-scale cloud operations, aware that cloud bills shoot up and things like that. So we've got stuff running on-prem in Kubernetes clusters and things like that. My internet connection's always still going to be there anyway. My electricity bill's still going to be there anyway. The kids are still going to need Netflix and things. So all those things are going to be ticked off. If a bit of hardware running in the corner means that I can avoid having 20 instances on Amazon running to start with, as our runners for testing, our testing run, things like that, then let's go down that route. And it's because we're building a product that is both cloud and on-prem, actually we get the benefit of, we know we can deploy it on-prem because we're doing it. We're doing it, and we know that we can do it in a hybrid way because this environment, the control plane is in the cloud, but it's a Q cluster here running the runners. And in the production environment is all in AWS. So we know we do the full hybrid side of things. So we're drinking our own champagne in that respect of knowing, where's the weak point, where are we going to come a cropper with, something that we haven't talked about. The way I historically built the Golang service and things like that is much of the config comes from a config JSON file, which just sits on disk next to the binary. So you can template that out in Terraform, really simple. Box is provisioned. Here's a config file. It's got all this stuff in it, things. But actually, when you kind of Dockerize that and things like that, that's not the easiest way to handle it. You'd rather be able to pass in some environment variables or command line things like that. So, a prime example of as soon as we tried to stick it on on Cube, we're then like, well, how do we template this file on a read-only file system that we're trying to keep super secure and hardened? That's a weak point. Well, let's now modify it so we can pull everything out of an environment variable or command line flags that we can pass in. And that will, work because there'll be a customer that will want to do a similar thing, and we've kind of already crossed that bridge. We've not found out then; we found out when we've done it ourselves. Yeah. So that was a really beneficial thing that we were doing just last week, and try and get that up and running. And realising that what I've done for the last 5 years with deploying stuff is great when it's just on AWS and I can template a file out in Terraform and use data on an EC2 instance and things like that. Doesn't work because I don't run things in Docker locally. I've never had to cross that bridge. So as soon as we tried to do it, it's highlighted this use case, and it's like, okay, well, but that's a really quick fix. I can change things so we can put environment variables instead of a config file and stuff like that. That was a tangent, I think.
It was a tangent.
We started off talking about funding.
We did. I want to come back to funding because that's at some point you need some money coming through the door.
Yeah.
To how do you, given your flexibility with sad lines, how do you square that circle, whatever the phrase is?
So,
because there's a date where obviously money runs out. How do you cope with that? How do you sleep at night? Do you sleep at night? That would scare the hell out of me.
So this is not my full-time focus. So there's money always by continuing to have other funding sources and things like that. Yeah. The idea is that at some point in the future this would be the sole.
So it's not like it's running out of money.
It's not like there's
a drain on my income for a certain amount of time.
Exactly. It's the holiday fund and the wife's moaning, well, why can't we do Disneyland this year? Because I'm doing this with my mate.
We can cut this out of the recording.
Please do. So kind of self-funding it by continuing to, work.
Yes.
But because we are targeting public sector, government agencies and enterprise level rather than high volume, low value, roll out to 10,000 individuals, we can manage that expectation because it's a single person we're having a conversation with, it's a single payment sad line, or delivery sad line, and not, well, we've got 10,000 people all moaning that they want 10,000 different plugins deployed for £10 a month.
Swamped.
You know, so because we've got that benefit because we've chosen to go the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, so we're not a consumer tool. You're more than welcome to. You can, you know, when it's released, there's nothing stopping you going on and automating your life with the tool. But we are targeting that kind of enterprise and public sector government agency, where it's a longer 6-month procurement process and there's a named person on the end of the phone that you're speaking to. So you can manage that expectation, you can manage the cash flow with that, and you can also have a pretty good indication of what their needs are going to be in terms of runners and scale and things like that.
Do you find that harder though? Because those guys typically don't like the small startups, or something a bit more proven?
Yes and no. The people are quite happy to use whatever tool solves their pain.
Yes.
The
IT
the amorphous blob of agency or government or public sector kind of like their known entity, things like that. So one of the ways we're approaching things with this, because again being kind of an early stage startup with no kind of social proof that we can do what we're doing, is providing kind of a proof of concept where we come in, identify a single workflow, we'll come in, we'll automate it for you, we'll get it all deployed on-prem, and very quickly, so like time box to a 2-week process, very quickly demonstrate value.
And who are you demonstrating that to? Are you demonstrating that to the users or to the large
So to the departments,
the people that's going to really benefit,
the people that will need to make that decision, but the users within
it.
that will benefit from it. So the people in the room at that point when we're kind of choosing what flow to do are the people that would actually directly benefit from it, and then however many levels up for the stakeholder that can actually then go, okay, here's the purchase order to get it done, type thing. But
how do you get those connections? Is that just
so we're relying
working before?
So there's a certain element of existing relationships with that. But what we're hoping for is a bit of a snowball effect. That is, once you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these in, you've got that case study, you've got that demonstration.
What we've done over here.
You've got the nice little icons on your website, you know, the logos on your website. You know, there's government agency 1, government agency 2, and you know, some large corporate enterprise over here. And, oh, well, if they use it, it must do what you can do, then kind of type thing. So the hardest, going from 0 to 1 customer is far harder than 1 to 10, in my experience. So it's kind of getting that first golden customer case study done through the door, and you've got to put in favours or stay up late or go a little bit circuitous route around the procurement, things like that. That's worth doing to get you that first step. So that kind of proof of concept process that we just talked about, typically also the cost of it comes under most government departments' procurement levels.
Yes.
So then they're not having to go out
to tactical move.
So they're not having to go out and get 3 separate quotes.
You've
got a 6-month procurement process. You've got to be an authorised supplier. You've got to be on a framework agreement. All these sorts of things. Actually, and we got this feedback quite well the other week. Actually, a lot of people will just authorise that as an expense.
Yes, within their budget.
Within their budget, you know, as a department, and it just be done. So they can just very quickly then see that value demonstrated back to them, and they've got seasoned, experienced, kind of security cleared engineers sat in the room with them, actually implementing their flows. You know, so they can. It's not just some bloke through the cloud sending you an email or through a help desk saying, "Oh, you've created your flow now." You've got an engineer that you've got a face and a name sat next to you. You can
white glove experience.
Silver platter. Nice. For your dog food.
Anyone got any questions for Andy?
No, excellent.
Can I take you back? I want to take you right back to where you started, because something you said rang a massive alarm bell for me.
An alarm bell?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've done, I'm by no means the level that you've accomplished it, but this sort of low-code, no-code stuff, you know, I've looked into, because it's a very generic approach to a lot of problems, right?
Yes.
So, and the thing that you said, I was like, oh my god, how do you deal with that? It's like, oh yeah. So we've got these low-level blocks, and if anyone wants to drop into JavaScript or Python, they can just author their own thing. And I was like, so how do you sandbox that?
So, two separate problems: JavaScript and Python.
Yeah, well, I mean, just sort of generically.
So fairly generically, both of them are having a massively curated list of what you can bring in. So in terms of Python packages, you can't just go pip install anything.
Yeah.
There's NumPy being one of them, things like that. So there's a curated, fairly small list of packages you can bring in. From the JavaScript point of view, it's run in such a way that there's no network access, there's no file access, that sort of thing. You're purely taking some data in, doing something with it, and pumping it back out. You don't just have like a JavaScript VM spun up that you can do anything and everything with, and it's because that's a great big massive security.
Yeah.
But you've got like a remote execution environment that you can run on anything in a secure data center. It's very much
it's a controlled interface, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, and because
we receive this and we're expecting something.
Well, this is it. So there's a defined function structure to it. You take in some input, and it's expecting an object of a particular type on the way out. Likewise, the organisation can turn them off. The same way you can disable the AI blocks and things like that. If you want that, then they are disabled by default. If you don't want to be able to allow people to write JavaScript, because it's very easy for people to go, I'll stick into ChatGPT, write me some JavaScript that does X. And before you know it, it's going out to like a third-party parsing tool that's taken all your national insurance numbers and formatted it. But if you're not an experienced developer, you don't know that's what's happening. So it's very easy to kind of vibe code your way in that way. So as an organisation, you might want to be like, we just don't want to allow that. So you can't have a low code. It is purely a no code experience, or Lego bricks that you have control over who does what and when, that type of thing. So echo your exact thoughts when I was like, it'd be great if I could just JavaScript, and then went down a rabbit hole of, well, how do I make sure that that's done in a secure way? Because that would be a perfect vector for data leakage, intrusion, anything like that. So we have put thought around the guardrails needed for that, and we will continue to always. We've got a kind of a risk value against each plugin because it's going to feed into a tool that we're opening next year. But we identify some plugins are more risky than others, and so we can then come back as a process to routinely reviewing the really high risk plugins every month, let's say, now is this still a good way of doing it? Has kind of best practice changed? Is there a better way of doing this? Is there a different tool that's come out that helps mitigate that risk? And then the really low risk stuff, we don't worry about. Once a year we have a look at something like that and just keep it going. But we're not then losing loads and loads of time reviewing 1,000 plugins every month or something like that, or just not doing it at all and leaving ourselves open to an issue.
And like, what year do you predict you'll be able to build Flomation in Flomation? What's the
so like a whole Turing complete sort of machine.
No more developers, really, ultimately, surely.
Well, you could.
That wasn't a serious question. I was just.
But it's interesting. So, because it's a no-code environment, there isn't an API for creating flows. So you'd struggle to. You'd have to drive the browser to click things in, because there are existing consumer tools that do similar things like N8N and Make and things like that, and they allow you to just paste some JavaScript and your flow appears, your workflow appears and things like that. And we've kind of purposely chosen to not go down that route to again prevent you being able to. Some people think it's kind of unhelpful, but prevent you from being able to kind of go up to Gemini or ChatGPT and be like, okay, using the tool Flomation, create the data structure that does this, and not really knowing, like even less so from a no-code point of view, not knowing what it's actually doing. So you can share flows and duplicate flows and copy flows within the organisation things. You can't kind of copy to a clipboard, send over to your mate, paste it, and all your credentials or anything like that come into it and stuff like that. So there is very much a disconnect between kind of existing consumer level tools and the route we're going, because the questions that get asked are very different, the problems they're trying to solve are very different, and that's one of the key ones there of, I can just execute JavaScript, brilliant, I can just do whatever I like. You can't run eval, you can't do any network access, you can't do disk access. Runners typically running a read-only file system anyway, so trying to write anything to disk is not going to work. So yes, we have thought about it to avoid that problem. Any other questions?
Just a quick one. I'm not gonna say this is all developers, but surely most developers have been sat there working on a product that is being licensed out or bringing in millions, and you think, pardon my French, you think, I want to work on something good, but this is a piece of shit. How are they making money off this?
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, as you probably have done, I could do this.
Yeah.
But then the scale of the economy gets quite scary, and you go, well, surely if they're going to pay someone 30 grand to sit there and do this, I can charge them 30 grand for my thing to do this. But as an introverted developer, where do you develop that sense of, I guess, courage to go out and say, yeah, Fujitsu could do this. They're a massive company, they're going to charge billions and not think about it. And there's that relationship and people hemorrhage money through IBM, etc. But how do you as an individual put value and to scale it correctly for what you think you're offering?
So it's a question that is kind of as old as time with any kind of, I have this idea, but someone else might do it bigger and better and things like that. And you kind of have to just realise that the execution is far more important than the idea, and actually just get pen to paper and start doing it. But the other side of your question of, well, Fujitsu could just spin up a team. They've seen that I'm trying to do this, spin up a team of 100 developers tomorrow and build a better tool. But if that's the kind of the fear you're going to go through, that'd be the same for anything anyone ever tried. There's always going to be a bigger, better, faster, more money company. You need to try and either just get on with it and be the first, do it better, which I think in my experience tends to be where smaller, more agile teams can do better products, is make a better product rather than being the first to release a product. Or by leveraging kind of existing relationships or something different from the product. So one of the unique points that we're approaching this from, because it's a very valid point of, well, why do they not just buy a tool from IBM, is that we are building out our support infrastructure to be kind of UK-based, security-cleared engineers that have existing roles within government agencies or have previously worked in government agencies. Because as soon as you then go to an organisation and go, if you have a problem, you've got an SC engineer that you can call, that ticks a lot of boxes for them running it on-prem and things like that. Whereas a lot of other tools, they cannot provide that. Because of that economy of scale, they're trying to deal with 100 countries across the world, all that have different levels of need and requirement. And yes, they've got the bank balance behind them, but if you're trying to target just a very narrow segment of UK public sector agencies, for example, one of the questions is going to be, well, how do I support this in a way that I can screen share and show you it that fits with kind of my security auditing and compliance. That's where we're kind of a little bit different, because I am by no means the best developer in the world. It's not the prettiest product in the world. Someone will also always be able to come and do something a little bit better or nicer. So we're trying to just differentiate ourselves with not the product directly, but the support around the product and how we can work with you and build that relationship that I sort of mentioned earlier to be kind of beneficial for both of us, and not just be like, we're the only ones that do it in the market, take it or leave it kind of thing. I think that a lot of tools kind of rely on that size, I think, to get their next customer.
I think that's the key, isn't it? Is what can we do differently that will disrupt their customers and say what are their customers crying out for that these guys are just too big?
So this is it. We always want to try and approach any conversation with a customer of how do we make it really easy for them to say yes, as opposed to, well, you should say no to them. It should be more about, well, how do you say yes to us? And it's that on-prem security, compliance, auditing, all these things that a security IT director at a government agency or whatever are going to be like, why would I not just do X? NA10 I could run on-prem and things like that, but you're never going to get it go through a compliance scan, it's never going to go through an audit, they're never going to get a phone number for someone that they can call and get support on-site potentially if they need it. So it's just trying to make it as easy as possible for someone to say yes to the product, rather than necessarily saying no to someone else's product. Like you just focus on yours being that thing rather than the distraction of others.
It's like a contradiction in reality, because when you work for a big company, like I've worked with Fujitsu, and I've been there where you have a spreadsheet and it says they want to add a button to this page, and they're charging 30 grand to do it, and you go, I'm the guy doing this, and I'm not getting paid.
Yeah, you're not getting paid that. And, yeah, I mean, yeah, you are painfully aware that the labour being done and the value of that labour there's a massive disconnect there.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to see that 30 grand, as you say, for the day's work that you put in or the half day's work for it. But that's because it shouldn't cost that in the first place.
Yeah.
Which is why when you came back to, well, why are we doing this? Because it shouldn't cost you £1 million a year in licensing fees to run a batch job. You know, it should be far cheaper, I hate the phrase, but there's more value to the taxpayer that can be provided with a kind of a more modern tool rather than going with an incumbent.
Yeah, I think that fear I've worked not necessarily with people, I've grown up around people who there was a guy 20 years ago, I'm going to say, who came from this idea that they could have a call centre and people could take payments for like gardening and window cleaning over a phone when you didn't have Zelle and stuff like that. And they did it for 6 months and they went, I've heard that MasterCard or someone's going to do it, so we're not going to bother, we can't compete with that. So it never came. And so when you work for these big companies, you can get a feature which might be one of your plugins, and in reality, when you look back, you go, that took 18 months from the first estimation session to actually going live. So there's kind of a fear there, like when you do these products, someone will say, well, what if, I don't know, talent or someone come along and make something that does what you do? But I don't know whether that's the answer. Is it fear? Is the execution the biggest thing, or is it just fear that stops you actually?
I think there's always going to be a bigger fish in the pond, and you can sit and do what ifs until you turn blue. And yeah, maybe we do this and we have a really great 6 months, and someone else comes along and you know scuppers it all and takes away our customers. Hopefully, we would kind of see it coming and could either pivot it or provide enough value that there's no reason to go to the kind of the new customer. But obviously, they're doing exactly what we're hoping to do: is be the new the new provider on the market and get people to come and join us. So you know, no one's afraid that we're going to come and take away Capita's revenue or anything like that. You know, you kind of need to just do it, get on with it, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Which is why we kind of approach this from a bootstrap point of view of kind of self-funding. There's no real harm if in 6 months we go, all right, we gave it a good try, it's not happened, let's walk away. I've not remortgaged my house, I've not got a great big office and a team of 20 that I now have to make redundant and things like that. You know, so it's embrace the ability of being agile and small and kind of really targeted, and just get on with it and deliver like good work and hope then for the best. I don't really like the whole just hope for the best and kind of get on with it kind of type thing, but from an entrepreneurial kind of point of view, it's the reality of it is you just need to kind of build the thing and then get it in front of people, whatever that thing is.
Have you had so because there's a danger in exactly what this guy was saying. Like, you know, you work for KPMG and you go, Jesus Christ, they contract me out at £3,000 a day, and I only get £300 a day. I could leave, I could charge £1,000 a day, and everyone would be happy. And they don't realise that the reason they pay £3,000 a day is because it's KPMG, and they're not going to pay you anything like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so you're in the same position, perhaps,
yes.
or maybe you're not, because there's no one else. Well, there obviously are other products, but you face the real situation that you could do the best thing in the world, and it gets to the guy who makes the decision, and he goes, he's not IBM, so I'm not going to pay him. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. I'd rather pay 30 grand a month to IBM than 3 grand to Andy. You know?
Which comes back to
so
that.
Have you had sort of a commercial? How much conviction do you have that if you build it, they will come? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that exact phrase I was going to try and echo there. Don't just build it and hope they'll come.
Yeah.
There's a whole load of work beyond just building the tool.
Sure.
And this is why kind of mentioned with Fran, that we are trying to leverage existing relationships. So it's kind of trusted advisors, as it were, of yes, there is a place for this tool, and then if you can, you're never going to get your first line IT engineer to convince the MD to buy you product. There's 20 layers of management of the tool, but if you can convince him and then his boss, and then the two of them together convince the department head, and well, now you've kind of got like a nice multiplier effect that actually by the time it gets to the MD, you've got this whole department saying this tool is really good and it's being used in X. So that going from 0 customer to 1 customer being the hardest bit.
Sure.
Once you've got that 1 customer, or a certain breed, let's say, that you can then be like, well, they're in government agency X, they've kind of done their due diligence already and they're happy with it. You don't shortcut that whole conversation of, well, I'll pay IBM because I know IBM. That you're always going to have a bit of that, and this is why you need to do that discovery project I mentioned, where you kind of get your foot in the door, demonstrate value really, really quickly, and it not be, oh, in 6 months' time, if I take a punt on you guys today, here's my credit card, take a punt on you guys, and it's going to take me 6 months to see any gain from it. Sure. It's a non-starter. That guy's never going to do it. But actually, he might do it for, well, we can have a meeting again next Friday, and I'll demonstrate what I've done, and we'll do it over lunch, see you back here kind of type thing. And he spent 4 figures, not 5, 6, 7 figures. It's a much easier conversation to have, and they might just be willing to, oh, I'll take the punt. It's an expense claim. It doesn't really derail the company if I get this wrong. There's no reputational damage. Like if you go and build a bridge across a river, you're going to go for your kids, because you know they can build a bridge. You're not going to go with Andy Esser construction round the corner kind of type thing.
I wouldn't, mate.
Thanks. But you would perhaps go for them for your patio and your extension, and then, or when you've got 100 people that have got happy patios and extensions and things like that, and stuff like that, you've got much more of that social proof. So we're trying to, I refer to it as a beachhead, but it's probably a little bit of an antagonistic way of doing it. But yeah, kind of once you've got that first customer, actually the benefits that come with it, that 1 then to 10 customers is a far easier process to do. And starts to make that conversation with the guy that just wants to go with IBM or Capgemini or Capita, whoever, Fujitsu's. It makes it a lot easier to try and have that conversation with them. But yeah, it's definitely a risk and a worry and a concern. Yeah. But I'm trying not to let it keep me up at night. Because again, I've not mortgaged, I haven't had to remortgage my house to fund this and things like that. If, as I said, I spend 6 months bashing my head against the table, why will no one just give us a chance? And we go, all right, wipe my hands with it. I've wasted a load of time and a bit of money sent to AWS and stuff like that for bills and paying for an expo and stuff like that. But it's not going to significantly derail my life. I'm not going to lose the shirt on my back or anything like that. So I think it's important to mitigate your risk if you're going to go down the route of doing something like this. Don't necessarily gamble things away. No,
absolutely, and I think on the producer side, your side, actually, the transition from 0 employees to 1 employee is harder than from 1 to 10.
Yeah, so your first hire will always be your hardest, your most critical, most devastating if you get it wrong. Yeah. And I've always approached it from, I'd rather me work 100 hours a week, sustain that 100 hours for 6 months and be like, okay, I need someone to take that 40 hours off me now, than get to 45 hours, be like, yeah, cool, let's go hire someone, let's pop down and I need an admin assistant or I need another developer, and then that only lasted 2-3 weeks, and now the money's dropped off again, and now I've got to sack them and things like that, because I've unfortunately had to go through the process of making a team redundant in the past, and it's the most horrific experience I've ever had to do. I never want to do it again. So I would rather continue to sacrifice my sleep until the point at which where actually getting that first employee makes really good sense, or getting screamed at by the wife that why are you always staying up on your laptop? Put your phone away.
I think we better wrap it up because it's getting late. But presumably you're going to sit around a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not going to rush off.
Yeah. Great stuff. Well, thank you very much, Andy. That was fantastic. Really